Hello, crypto boys and ghouls, and welcome back to the channel, Tales from the Cryptmancer, where we feature content on play and earn games on the blockchain, such as Splinterlands. And in today's video, I want to talk about, well, it's kind of a math topic, probably not too surprising, but it has to do with the question of, does Splinterlands have a competitive issue or problem within the code that might need to be at least illuminated or potentially addressed depending on actually what might be happening here. And I wanted to put some context around this particular question because I think it's interesting. It's probably not something we as players of Splinterlands think about very often, if at all, but I think it is relevant because, well, let's face it, in this game, as players of Splinterlands, whether you play tournaments or ranked battles, perhaps compete in the leaderboard challenges for winning DEC, you're trying to win essentially money or assets or crypto, right, in the form of SPS or cards or DEC or whatever that happens to be within whatever mode of the game that you're competing in. And this particular question of seed RNG, I think, is very relevant. And I definitely would like to hear either Weirdbeard and or Matt's take on this particular question, because as we look at the future of Splinterlands, when it comes to competitive esports and competitive gaming, can Splinterlands truly be competitive if there are some fundamental flaws in the game logic or programming itself? Could it pass, for example, a SOX audit for compliance and random number generation? Well, before we hop into that question, let's talk a little bit about why specifically this evening this topic came to my mind and why I decided to create a video on the topic. Specifically, in the game of Splinterlands here, you can see I played 2 battles here this evening after dinner, just started loading up Splinterlands and figured I would try and push here to rank up here with less than 2 days left in the season. I played 2 battles here pretty quickly and lost both battles, which I felt I had the better team and just ran into some really bad luck. And from a rating perspective, I lost 19 rating and 10 rating. So it's basically 29 rating drop there between those 2 losses. But the actual delta here and the rating difference, had I won against both of those opponents who are ranked higher than me, the difference is basically 80 rating points or more potentially in the swing of rating here. So instead of being at 34-42, I might actually be in the range of 35-22, which puts me very close to Champion 3. That's just after 2 matches that, in my mind, seemed like they could have definitely gone the other way. And what was interesting for me as I started looking into this a little bit more, not just relying on my gut feeling here, and I'll provide a link to these particular battles in question here in the video description if you're curious how the battles went. But according to Splinter Tools, which gives us kind of a mathematical view of the battles. Now, it's not, I don't think, 100% accurate here, but it gives you kind of a range here. Those last 2 battles, we were a favorite to win, 81% and 96% specifically. And if you look at the last 4 battles, well, the 3 losses we had, we were technically favorite to win. And so what was interesting to me as I watched the battles, just the first time, just going through them and saying what just happened here, and then seeing the Splinter Tools data, it really makes you wonder here, because could we have an issue with RNG seeding in Splinterlands that no one's talking about? And I want to talk a little bit more specifically about some of the numbers and odds as we look at these particular battles. And then I'm going to go into some specific data by a community member, Cimarron, who actually had written a fantastic blog with a lot of data that I want to cover, at least at a high level, in today's video. So when we look at this data here, what I would say is, if you look at my last battles here, like on the leaderboard right now, for example, this season we've played 47 battles, we've won 32, which means we've lost 15 battles so far this season. And what I did is I went back into the battle log and pretty much checked here on Splinter Tools, went through the battles, and of the 15 losses that I've had this season in ranked play, what we found is roughly 5 out of the 15 battles where we had losses, we actually were the favorite to win. So 5 out of 15 battles that we had the best team played actually means essentially that 33% of the time we fielded the best team, we still lost the game. Now, what does that really mean? Well, it means basically that with that high of a variance, 33% basically is not a game of skill anymore because, well, it's just, flip a coin even at best, and you're going to lose no matter what team you might play, as long as you have a team within reason that has a chance of winning. And what do I mean by that? Well, basically, if you're familiar with poker and odds, there's definitely a mathematical piece of poker that makes it a game of skill. In many cases, is what it's argued because there's math involved with random chance in numbers and statistics. And what you can do is, let's say the odds of winning an 81% or a 96% or even a 63% favorite based on odds of the game mechanics. Well, it's basically similar to in poker. If you flop top pair and your opponent flops middle pair, and you go all in on the flop with basically 2 cards to come. Basically, if you get in that all your money in with the best hand in that particular case, the chances of your opponent to draw out and beat you and win is roughly a 4-to-1 ratio of chance for that to happen. He or she basically has 5 outs, roughly speaking, to beat you in that hand, not counting runner or just assuming a rainbow board and a disconnected flop. Basically, they have 5 outs, which is basically a 20% chance to beat you by the time the river card hits. And what we saw here with this very small sample here, 5 out of 15 is obviously 33%, which is roughly, almost, well, it's more than 50% higher chance or variance being displayed here. Now, that is not a large sample. It is a very small sample size, but it's a sample size that we have to work with. And I just wanted to illustrate that from a poker perspective because, if you're a poker player, that might make sense. But is it just, my perception here in this particular case that's the issue and not necessarily the game's coding or RNG mechanism? Well, I'm going to refer you to an article here that was, again, researched, created, and posted by Cimarron, who's a regular on Splinterlands TV as both a host and a audience member. Posted here on Peak D a very interesting article last week talking about RNG. Again, I'm going to provide a link to this article and blog from Peak D. I highly recommend, if you're watching this video, to read this article because it is very insightful. And what Cimarron discusses here in very, I would say, very good detail, yet also very simple and easy to follow, is the concept of random number generation, and random number generation, particularly what might happen with a seed value and how that can lead to specific patterns that are not truly random in nature. You can see some of these visuals here of the groupings of the RNG seeded values here. As in these color charts, you can see the peaks and the valleys very closely grouped. And then when you see a true random number generated without a seed, you can see a much different pattern to the peaks and valleys in the groupings. Why is this important? Again, I will leave the link to this article because I think it's really fantastic and really interesting. But the net result is, when you, for example, if I were to go into Splinterlands and I were to replay this particular battle, how is it that the result of this particular battle on the blockchain is always the same, no matter who replays it or when they replay it? Well, a reason why it could always have the same results for yourself, myself, or anyone else that clicks on this particular battle is because an RNG seed is used to determine the results. And if an RNG seed on the blockchain, for example, a timestamp using milliseconds as the seed number, that would actually explain sometimes where in battles you always miss, or you always hit, or Dr. Blight never poisons or never afflicts, or he always poisons and always afflicts. It's because the RNG seed mechanism that the code could be leveraging or using for its replayability and repeatability could be skewing the battle and not really having RNG, true RNG in effect here. And why is that important? Well, it goes back to my comment at the beginning of this video in the fact that we have people looking to have Splinterlands be a competitive esport, to have sponsors, and for people really looking to earn money in this game, whether they're in tournaments or ranked battles, for example. Well, if the game isn't necessarily a game of skill and it is heavily influenced by RNG seeding, then that could be problematic. And I guess the question or the ask that I would have, perhaps in an upcoming town hall, is if Matt or someone on the development team could discuss the blockchain battle results and how the battles are replayed and how the battle results are determined, so that we can understand, is there truly an RNG seed potential issue here that we might be concerned about in the long-term competitive nature of this game. Something, again, that I think it would be nice to kind of pull back the curtains to look at maybe the logic in the code, not necessarily to expose the code itself, but to say, hey, this is how we run battles. This is how we determine randomness or RNG in the battle results. This is how abilities are procced or applied. This is how your hit chances and miss chances are determined. And, if there is no RNG seed issues that we should be concerned about, well, then that will be easily kind of proved, or, we'd have statistics or data around the code that would show that. But until then, the question remains, is Cimarron's hypothesis here of groupings and seeded RNG, is that potentially what we're seeing in Splinterlands with these battle results on the blockchain? And is it a cause for concern? Is it something that we might want to look at from a development perspective moving forward as an item that gets added to the roadmap that might need adjustment, similar to how the effects were just coded recently for simultaneous, like poison or resurrects and other things? So again, this goes back to the core of the game development. It's a question that I think we should have answered as a community, because again, when people are playing tournaments, when people are playing ranked battles, it's good to know, what we're dealing with. So thank you for bearing with me as we talked about this topic. I know it has some math tones and themes here in it. Again, even if you're not a super math whiz necessarily, I definitely am not one. I just like to use math to look at data, but definitely look at Cimarron's article. I'm going to link it in the video description. And let me know in the comments below, what are your thoughts? And I look forward to hopefully getting some updates from the team on a town hall in the future, and just to see if it's potentially an issue or if it's all in my imagination. Until next time, keep stacking those stats.